I think it goes without saying that Dragon Ball is arguably the most important manga ever created. In 1984, artist Akira Toriyama would release Dragon Ball, published in Weekly Shonen Jump. It followed the story of Son Goku. Loosely inspired by the classic story Journey to the West and Hong Kong action films, Dragon Ball would blossom into an ever-growing franchise with 4, now 5 different anime series, several OVA films, and of course, video games. Most shonen manga franchises are lucky to get 1 or 2 games, but Dragon Ball video games have been just as consistent as the series itself. As far back as Dragon Ball Dragon Daihakyo on the Famicom, Dragon Ball has been no stranger to the world of video games, especially as time went on with more modern games like Dragon Ball FighterZ, the Xenoverse duology, and Kakarot all being recent examples of titles based on the popular manga. However, a very beloved sub-series of Dragon Ball games was the Budokai Tenkaichi series, a series of full 3D fighting games that were every Dragon Ball fan's dream, allowing many to finally be put into the shoes of their favorite characters and get to engage with insane fights that they could have only imagined happening back in the day. However, despite their popularity, after 2007's Budokai Tenkaichi Free, this particular sub-series of games would become dormant for more than a decade. However, on March 5th, 2023, it'd be revealed to the shock and joy of all across the globe that this sub-series of games would return. Later that year in December, we'd also learn its name, Sparking Zero. Deciding to adapt the original Japanese name of the series rather than the previous localized name of Budokai Tenkaichi, Sparking Zero certainly had a lot riding on it. Tenkaichi had a legacy to uphold, and there was a very real possibility of the game not being able to live up to the hype. Well, it's a good fucking thing it managed to be amazing in every way, isn't it? You stand against the odds of all things in space and time. You tore down the walls of the prison without care for what's inside. An escape from the force I cannot be denied. Like the countless before you consumed, I'll leave nothing behind.
You mean you haven't figured it out yet? I am the warrior you've heard of in legends. I am pure of heart and awakened by fury.
Dragon Ball Sparking Zero is a 2024 video game that came out back in October of 2024 to a mostly positive response. The game even managed to sell so many pre-orders that it outsold the newest Call of Duty, which, whether you like it or not, that is a feat worth pointing out. The sales aren't everything. You can make as much money in the short term, but what matters most is being able to stand out in the long term. So where do we begin with discussing Sparking Zero? This question is worth asking because Sparking Zero, unlike most other modern arena fighters, actually does have a sizable amount of content from the get-go. This isn't a Curse Clash situation at all. Though speaking of Curse Clash, I guess it makes sense to start by praising the game's main menu. Yes, really. While games like Curse Clash just slapped a Blu-ray looking ass menu UI onto the game and called it a day, Sparking Zero decided to put a lot more effort and personality into its own main menu. Each menu option is represented by these different scenes, and transition between each section of the menu is represented by Goku going to and from each location. It really adds this level of personality to the main menu, an aspect of the game that most likely won't even properly be appreciated due to how little time you spend on the main menu compared to actually playing the game. However, I think the main menu is a great representation of just how in-depth Sparking Zero is, with its attention to detail and the real care that went into every aspect of the game. Before we tackle anything else, I guess it'd be worth going over the game's story mode. Sparking Zero allows you to play for the events of the series, starting at the Saiyan Saga of Z and ending with a Tournament of Power from Super. Well, provided that you're playing the Goku story mode, which is 99% likely to be the first story mode option you finish to begin with. Yes, there are multiple story modes, not just Goku, but also Vegeta, Gohan, Piccolo, Future Trunks, Frieza, Goku Black, and the biggest fraud ever introduced into Dragon Ball, Jiren.
Know your fucking place, trash!
I will be transparent in saying I only played Goku's story mode so far, not really taking the time to properly indulge in the other additional story modes. But it is admittedly interesting to me how some of the story mode options are of villains like Frieza or Goku Black. Speaking of the story mode, there's also secret objectives or even upfront dialogue choices during the story mode that allow you to branch off the proper Dragon Ball canon and play into what-if scenarios. These branching paths allow for some pretty interesting non-canon situations, like Vegeta turning Super Saiyan on Namek during the Frieza saga, or Goku fighting the androids after defeating Cell in his first form. I don't really have the time to list and go over every single what-if situation the game offers. There's a Bumbles McFumbles video you can watch for that. But it's definitely one of my favorite aspects of the game. What-if scenarios aren't a new concept for Dragon Ball games. Games like the Budokai games, Ultimate Butoden, and the Raging Blast series also featured what-if missions and scenarios like this. Dragon Ball fans, like me, tend to enjoy asking these sort of questions and imagining these kinds of what-if scenarios. Hell, if you think about it, Xenoverse 1 and 2 base their entire storylines around fixing non-canon mishaps in the timeline. At this point, what-if scenarios might as well be seen as a tradition for Dragon Ball games. However, the story mode isn't the only example of what-ifs in Sparking Zero, because there's also custom battles. Custom Battle is a mode that allows players to create and share created what-if battles, including custom cutscenes, though granted, the cutscenes are text-only and have really limited animation, but the tools are enough to allow Dragon Ball fans to craft their own what-if situations between characters. I kept joking prior to the release that this was the Dragon Ball franchise's own equivalent to Little Big Planet's custom levels from way back in the day. I'm a big fan of when games allow these sort of creative level / creative battle modes that let people share and play not just their own custom levels, but also the ones made by others in the community. It's a super cool way of connecting the community of a game, and it also allows for essentially endless content for players to engage with. It's really fun, and I do wish more games would include a feature like this. Another feature I really enjoy in this game is the in-game shop. You see, a lot like Smash Ultimate, this game actually has unlockable characters when you first boot it up. You can use in-game currency to unlock mini characters very early due to doing the story mode. I actually unlocked most of who I wanted before even finishing Goku's story, so it's not going to be long before you unlock your favorite characters, if they aren't already unlocked from the start. There's also online, which, you know, is great if you're playing with your friends. I've noticed with randoms, though, the online tends to just be a lot of waiting and not connecting. However, when playing against my Steam friends, the online works fine and doesn't have the same problems as trying to play against randos. There's also an issue with playing the game online via Steam Deck. I actually learned via Shade X's video on the game that apparently due to the deck running on Linux, you can't match up against players who are playing on Windows. Which is like, super weird, but I think it's worth noting if you're planning on picking this game up on PC and only own it on Steam. I'm not saying any of this to hate on the online features. Like I said, the online has been pretty spotless when playing against friends, but I felt like it would be important to point out the issues I had when playing against randoms in case it might be a factor for you. I also can't cover how the online is on PlayStation or Xbox, as I've only played this game on PC, but I do know the game lacks any form of crossplay, which is just so fucking weird to me. Especially when half the people who bought this game bought it on PS5. I don't know if Namco will update the game to support crossplay in the future or not, but as it stands, you can only fight people on the same platform as you. Also, the game does have split-screen multiplayer, and this was going to be a section about how you could only fight in one stage using it, but as of December 12th, they decided to update the game so that all the stages now work in split screen, so this entire portion of the script is now outdated because I wrote this video back in November. Now, let's talk about the character roster, an important part of any Dragon Ball fighting game, especially since this is the first Budokai game to release post-Super's existence. The game at launch has 182 characters. Now, of course, this is including different variants of the same characters like Goku or Vegeta, for example, but there is a reason for that, as each version is usually a different transformation or a different era of the character for particular places in the timeline of the series. I think the only issue with the roster is the severe lack of original Dragon Ball characters, as the game is mostly filled with Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball Super characters, with the only OG Dragon Ball character included proper being Kid Goku from the original series. However, if you're a big GT fan, then you'll be happy to know it's got quite a few reps in the roster like GT Goku, Super Saiyan 4 Goku, Baby Vegeta, Pan, Omega Shenron, people like that. I think the only original DB character I'd want to see them add is Launch. Probably only her blonde self, as I don't think purple-haired Launch has much fighting ability, but still, having Launch be playable would be cool, and the game is planned to get DLC based on Superhero and Daima, so it's not off the table. In general, I'd also like to see characters like Majin 21, Chi-Chi, Granola, and the earlier mentioned Launch show up in the future as DLC. I haven't really put too much thought into the possible DLC the game could have, because the game at launch is already busting with content, which, in the age of games being released by companies like Nintendo for $60 only to have almost no actual content, it's so relieving to see a game like Sparking Zero launch with a ton of modes, characters, and genuine love put into it. I honestly do think that Sparking Zero is the exact kind of game any Dragon Ball fan could ask for. And that's saying a lot, because games like Xenoverse 2 and Kakarot also exist. Dragon Ball fans have been eating good for the past 20 years in terms of video games. And why wouldn't we? Dragon Ball is the shonen manga. The series has influenced and impacted every shonen after it in some way, shape, or form. Even outside of the subgenre of shonen, a lot of media over the past several decades has had some degree been inspired or influenced by Dragon Ball, including my own work. Dragon Ball was one of the big three pillars that inspired me to become a comic creator. You can even see clear signs of its influence in some of the aspects of my webcomic Gun Kitty. I grew up with Dragon Ball. It's become a sort of comfort media I always return to whenever I'm mentally unwell or just having a really bad spiral. As a kid, I was wowed by the stories of overcoming obstacles and striving to be stronger than you were yesterday. Ever since I was introduced to the series via a Raging Blast demo packed into an Xbox 360 demo disc and watching DBZ Kai when it premiered on Nicktoons all the way back in 2010. I remember me and my sister at like 11 or 12 would go into our big yard and pretend to fly around and fight like the characters with imaginary ki blasts and super forms, as little kids tend to do. Even now, as an adult, I have so many vivid memories attached to Dragon Ball. I can still remember where I was when me and my sister first watched DBZ Kai on Nicktoons as kids back in 2010. I can still remember what it was like when games like Xenoverse came out for the first time and blew me away in 2014 by having a character creator and letting me play around in this world I had fallen in love with. I remember how important it was to me in 2019 seeing Dragon Ball Super Broly in theaters alongside my sister. The same sister who grew up alongside me loving Dragon Ball, and there we were, as adults, seeing Super Broly together and not realizing it'd be one of the last movies we'd see in theaters together before she moved away. And I remember where I was on March 8th, 2024, when it was announced to the world that Akira Toriyama had died. And I had no idea how to react. Internally struggling because the creator of one of my strongest lifelong obsessions, the creator of a series that was a part of the big three that got me to appreciate comics as an art medium, the man who wrote and designs so much of what got me through the worst times of my life. He was gone. Gone before I could ever meet him or talk to him. I never met Akira Toriyama, but his works mean the world to me. It's the beauty of art. The way something you create can impact hundreds around the world. They'll never meet you. Dragon Ball transcended cultural barriers, impacted the lives of millions all over the world, and most importantly to me, it kept me going. It still keeps me going. Dragon Ball's motivated me as an artist. It's motivated me as a person. It's motivated me to take my mental and physical health more seriously, actively improving my diet and my plans to start working out semi-regularly going into the new year. The lessons I've taken away from Dragon Ball as a kid, as a teen, and even now in present day as an adult stick with me. It cannot be understated how important Sparking Zero is for me. I remember on release week, I got into a VC of my sister and we just played several matches and it was like we were back in time playing Raging Blast as kids again. That kind of joy is so immeasurable. The world is complicated. It can be harsh, life can hurt and bring forth tons of setbacks and obstacles that get us down. It can be easy to fall into bad habits, to look back on the past with rose-tinted glasses and think everything was better back then, when in reality, the world was just as complicated and harsh then as it is now. But Dragon Ball, it taught me at a young age that tackling obstacles head-on allows us to get stronger. It's okay to cry, to fall, to take a moment to train yourself for the trials ahead. But it's always important to get up, to take on whatever pain it is in your life and keep going. Every obstacle Goku faced in the series, he would always get back up and face the challenges head-on. He'd always find a way to succeed past the struggles that life brought him. And the older I get, the more I cherish that lesson. Dragon Ball is awesome. It's inherently one of the coolest pieces of media out there. But it's also one of the most inspiring to me. Sparking Zero isn't just a video game to me. It's a love letter to the legacy of Dragon Ball. A legacy that continues to inspire, influence, and motivate billions all over this sick, sad world we live in. Akira Toriyama's death shook the world, but his life shook it harder. Thank you, Akira Toriyama. Thank you for the memories, for letting me grow up with your characters, and for the lessons that your stories taught me that I carry even through my adulthood, which arguably is when I need them most. I don't know what the future of Dragon Ball will be like after Toriyama. Once Daima ends, the series will be left in the hands of Taro, who I'd be willing to bet is nervous as hell with the weight he's going to carry forward. It's something unpredictable. I just hope that Toriyama had the time of his life, because thanks to him, I had the strength to continue mine. I've been the Girly Wolf Pup. Keep sparking, everyone.